We kind of started some sermons last week and this week, kind of focusing on grandparents, because many of you here are grandparents, but some of you are not. Some of you are maybe not grandparents, but there are people in your lives that you love and care for, that you're able to give to and to reach out to. And no matter what stage you are in life, even though this is kind of directed towards grandparents, there's something in here that applies to all of us. And I'm not a grandparent, but as I prepared this, I could see my own life and see where I need to line up to what God is doing in my life and in the world around me. And so let's not limit ourselves, but if you are a grandparent here today, thank you for your role. Thank you for doing your job. Thank you for giving to those grandchildren that God has given to you. We're going to begin by reading a passage that may seem kind of strange, talking about this topic, but as I was searching the scriptures this week, this just really jumped out at me, and I said, this is exactly where we need to go with this. In Deuteronomy chapter 11, it says here, and this is Joshua talking to a generation of people that are getting ready to go into the promised land. He says, "Observe, therefore, all the commands I am giving you today, so that you may have the strength to go in and take over the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, and so that you may live long in the land the Lord swore to your ancestors to give to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. The land you are entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by foot, as in a vegetable garden. But the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. It is a land the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year to its end." There was a generation of people, and you kind of know the story probably, a generation of people who were in slavery in Egypt, and God led them through Moses' leadership out of slavery, just miraculous deliverance, and out of the country, across the sea that parted in front of them, and into freedom as they were headed to a land that God had given their forefathers and promised to them as well, that they could take back over again and claim as their own. God had delivered them from slavery. God, as they traveled through the desert, had given them miraculous gifts of food. I mean, there were birds, quail, that would just fall out of the heavens and land on the ground that they could eat. Every morning, there was a thing called manna, bread that would appear on the ground right in front of their tents that they could take and eat that day. God led them. There was a pillar of fire by night that led them, and there was a pillar of cloud by day that led them. The people were assured of God's presence through that cloud and fire day and night. God gave them a great leader, Moses, who was wise and able to lead them well. God protected them from their enemies. None of the other tribes around there even tried to overtake them, because they knew that God was with those people and they didn't even dare try to attack them. God gave the people his law, the 10 Commandments, plus some others that were added onto it, to say, this is how you should live. This is how you can worship me, how you can please me. And as my people brought into freedom out of slavery, you're free to worship me now. And the people were free to do so. And he gave them promises of a hope and a future. They were going to a land that's flowing of what they say, milk and honey. You know, things that were good and sweet and overflowing. But what did that generation of people do with it? If you remember, especially your little Sunday school stories, over and over again, the people wasted it. The generation that was in slavery, that left Egypt, they complained. Often they would say, we'd rather go back and live in slavery in Egypt than live out here in the desert. We're tired of this quail. We're tired of the manna. We're tired of the water that God miraculously gives us out here. We're tired of this. We're tired of that. We'd rather go back to there. They would gather more manna than they needed in greed. And God told them, if you take more than what you need, it's just going to rot. But people would continue to take more than what they wanted. and it would rot. They complained against Moses. They built idols to worship when God said, I'm right here with you. He was right there in a cloud, in a blazing fire. But the people took their eyes off of that and would build golden cows to worship instead. They ignored God's laws, and they were afraid of the people around them. They were afraid of being attacked. They saw the people that were around them, and they cowered down in fear instead of believing that God was going to take care of them. And over and over and over again, that generation blew it. Even though they were given so much, they chose a different way. And their greed and their grumbling, their disobedience, their lack of worship to God carried consequences that God said to that generation, you're not going to enter into the land. So you're going to spend the next years of your life wandering out here in the desert because it's the consequences. You have not been grateful and you've not followed me as I am leading you. But at the time that this passage is being read in Deuteronomy chapter 11, that generation has died off now, and there's a new generation following them. And God is saying to that generation through Joshua's leadership, I'm going to take you into the land that was promised, but follow me, follow my ways, follow my decrees. And that's when he gives them that promise that this was given to your ancestors and it's given to those that are following you today to enter into this land. And your generation, will be responsible to enter into the land and to enjoy what's there and to set it up as an inheritance for those that are following behind you. As parents, as grandparents here today, we represent generations that have an opportunity to be able to pass on to those behind us what it is to be faithful to a faithful God. We have that opportunity to pass that on to them and that responsibility as well. And here in Deuteronomy 11, we have a new generation that's getting ready to enter into the land given to them. And that was very important, that the people had a home, that they had a land. Because for several hundred years, the people had been slaves in another land in Egypt. They had to work the land for somebody else. They were now going to be given a land that belongs to them, that they would be able to use it as they chose, and that would benefit themselves and their families. And they had an opportunity to have a land that would carry their name. It was for their people, for their nation. But if we were to tweak this passage, and let's, instead of saying the word land, let's substitute it with the word life. And let's see how this might apply to us today. We read it again, Deuteronomy 11. And I know changing God's word is not what we're supposed to do, but if we could just apply it in a way that fits us today, let's just think about that. It says, observe therefore all the commands I'm giving you today, so that you may have the strength to go in and take over the life that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. And so that you may live long in the life that the Lord swore to your ancestors to give to them and their descendants, a life flowing with milk and honey. The life that you are entering to take over is not like the life of Egypt from which you have come, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by foot as in a vegetable garden. But the life that you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a life of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. It is a life that the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it from the beginning of the year to its end. We may not have land to pass on to future generations, but we have a life to pass on to future generations. And by tweaking this and applying it to us today, God has given us a life that can be an example, that can teach, that can share, that can love, that can grow, and that we can observe God's commands and pass that on to the generations that are following us so that they will have a life with God as well. This passage talks about the irrigation in the deserts of Egypt. In Egypt, where they lived, they had to dig trenches to irrigate the land so it would grow because it was a very dry place. They had to work hard just to get the plants to grow. But God said, I'm taking you to a place where you don't have to dig irrigation ditches. I'm going to give you water from heaven. Like you. I love it when I don't have to go out and water my garden with the hose because I know that God's going to send the rain. When he sends the rain, I don't have to get out and do that and roll the hose back up and mess with all that. So I like those rainy days, in fact, in the summer, because it makes my life easier. But God's saying to these people, you used to have to dig to get your plants. Now you don't have to. Some of us try too hard. We try too hard to follow God. We try too hard. We work at it with all our might, hoping that God will be pleased. And God says, no, you don't have to work at it. You don't need those irrigation systems in your life. I'm showering down my grace and my love upon you so that your faith can grow. I'm sending the people, I'm sending my word, I'm sending situations into your life that helps you to know my presence and to know that I am right here with you and helping you grow, that your life grows in me. And so we put away our shovels and we experience the life that God has promised for us, to be dependent on him, and that we can enter into that life with him. Because if we're not entering into that life with him, then we don't have that to pass on to the ones that are behind us. How are we living our lives? What is our water source that we're getting? How are we growing so that we have something to pass on to our children and grandchildren and those that are looking to us as the older generations, that if we've lived our lives and we've learned and we've experienced things that we can pass on to the younger generations. And if we had to choose, do we want to live with irrigation systems or do we want to live with the rain that comes from the clouds that God sends? Last week we were talking about some of the benefits that different generations have, how we can learn from one another. And just to kind of repeat that a little bit today, an older generation typically has mature love, wisdom, life experience, a keen perspective, and examined priorities. You know, when you've lived your life, you see things as you get older a little more clearly. You understand things you didn't understand when you were younger before. And we have things in the older seasons of our lives to be able to share wisdom and experience and that love and that perspective and those priorities to pass on to our younger generations. First, by how we live our lives, that they can see that modeled. Secondly, by how we teach it, how we talk about it to them, that we have the opportunities to do that. The younger generations have a lot to give to the older generations to benefit the world. The younger generations, next screen here, have a lot of energy, a lot of passion, enthusiasm, fresh, innovative ideas, a sense of innocence and idealism that's healthy, that helps contribute to our families, to our churches, to our communities, to our places of business where we work. You know, the younger can bring those gifts into it as well. And as we have an intergenerational atmosphere within our churches, within our families, within our communities, when we work together and we benefit from one another, then we're able to fulfill the harmony and the unity that God has planned for us. And as we bring those two together, man, if our church had everything on that screen, wow, we would be a dynamic church. If our families had everything on that screen, wow, what a dynamic family. If our community has everything that's up here on the screen, what a dynamic community we have. And so coming together and sharing benefits us and helps us to be who God has intended us to be. Last week I shared some ways that we could actually do this. One is just to continue opportunities for your own spiritual growth. You know, we never get to a place where we stop learning, or we never get to a place where we just retire as a Christian and just coast out the rest of our lives. We continue to learn and to grow and to understand things that we didn't understand before. And as a church, you know, the leadership's job is to make sure there are opportunities for you to grow. Here on Sunday morning, you come together to worship God and we grow together. You know, we have Sunday school classes, we have home Bible study groups. I'm offering lots of opportunities for people to get on board and let's study some things, let's learn some things, not so we can become just smarter, but so that we can use these things in our lives and we can take advantage of these opportunities. We give them to our young people, but we offer them to the older people as well. We need to keep learning and growing. Another thing we need is to just evaluate the moments of our lives and prepare to articulate the lessons learned. You know, there's so many things we've gone through in our lives that those would be really beneficial for other people younger than us, that know that we love them, they love us, we respect them, they respect us, to share those things, to be able to offer our understanding of the world to a younger generation that are there. In your bulletin today, you've got this handout. You've probably already glanced at it here. There's a million questions on here that a younger person could ask an older person, and that a younger person could look at themselves and say, these are things I'd love to share with the generations that go on behind me. You know, what was school like when you were a kid? How is it different than school now? You know, what kind of pets did you have growing up? What were school dances like in your day? Did you have a job as a teenager? What was it? How much did you get paid? I mean, maybe these are just basic things, but these basic things not only bind people together. I mean, younger generations need to know that older generations weren't born old. They need to know that they've passed through the things that the younger ones have. And to be able to share those things brings people together and offers the opportunity to share even deeper things. Some of the questions on here share some really deep, intimate type things. But what greater place for a young person to learn these things than from a generation that they love and trust, and that loves them and trusts them. Believe me, there are people out there who want to teach our younger people their values. They want to give them their life experience. And they grab their attention and they fill their minds with a lot of trash. We have something great to offer them. So let's not be shy. Let's not back off. And if younger generations don't seem like they want to listen, they do. They're hungry for that. Statistics and studies have shown that young people, they want a loving person near them to teach them these things, to share these things with them. And when we are silent, then they go to other places for answers. And so this is maybe just a tool to get you thinking about things that when younger generations around you, these are some topics you can bring up if you're not sure what to talk about. But share about your life and ask about theirs and build that relationship and prepare to tell about the lessons you've learned in life. And you may say, oh, I'm just the quiet type. I don't like talking about things. Don't let that be an excuse to keep your life experience and love and wisdom from being passed on to somebody else. It's a great thing to be able to pass on. A third thing we do is take initiative, be intentional. And I kind of talked about this. It's like, think about it, plan it ahead of time. Man, you know the grandkids are coming over. Think about, well, what was something I could talk about today? What's something I could share? What's something about God? What's something about faith that really matters that I can weave into the conversations here today? And just kind of thinking ahead about that, since sometimes it doesn't happen spontaneously, just prepares our hearts. Pray about it. Say, God, what can I share with the generations that are following me, with my kids, with my grandkids, with the neighbors, the people that I have? Maybe you work with people who are much younger than you. You can be those spiritual grandparents to them and pass on to them some things that will help them. Number 4 is just cultivate the relationships, whether they're with your blood or Christ's blood that bring you together. Again, there are people in your life, whether they're of your own blood or whether you're brought together through the church, through Christ, that bring you together, that you can pass on these things. Cultivate these relationships. Make them a priority in our life. You know, we get busy doing things, but we get busy doing things so much that we can't just be. People don't see who we are. They just see what we do. And when we talk about our lives with each other, we usually talk about all the things we do more than who we are. But if we can get to that level of conversation with one another where we're sharing who we are and not just what we did that week or that month or what's happened in our lives, it'll make our relationships much more enriched. There's a thing that I try to share because it's helped me a lot about kind of a cycle of relationships We need different levels of relationships in our lives. We need people that are over us, that are like teachers, mentors, people that are examples for us. But we also need friends, people that are on our level. You know, we understand each other because we go through the same things in life at the same time. It's very enriching to have those relationships, but it's great to have students or followers, people coming behind you. Unfortunately, in English language, there's just not really good words for some of these things, but people that follow us who we're able to pour our lives into so that they can rise up to a level that they need to be at. And we need each of those levels in our lives to have a balanced life. But let's say that we live our lives and we don't have the first level, then what do we lack? We're not going to grow. We're not going to have somebody that's kind of pulling us up. We're not going to have people in our lives that are building and speaking into us to help us to become better people necessarily. Let's say we don't have friends in our lives, but we have people on those other levels. Life gets kind of lonely because we don't have somebody to share who's at the same level, stage in life that we're in. But if we don't have people behind us that we're pouring into, then we're getting a lot, but we're just not giving out very much. And we just kind of soak it all in and kind of get fat and comfortable, but we're not sharing with others what's been poured into us. And so it's important that we have all three of these levels of relationships in our lives. And I just hope that challenged each of us to make sure that they are there. And if you're lacking in one of those areas, take the initiative. Find a friend, okay? Take an initiative. Pour into somebody younger than you. Or if you feel like you still need to grow and you need somebody to help you to grow, find somebody that will help you grow, to say, hey, I look at your life and I really like what I see and I think I could learn some things from you. And whether you're 8 or 18 or 48 or 88, we need people in our lives that are going to pull us up. There's no achieving graduation from life that you've learned it all and you can just sit back and move on. So share that time together. Share those relationships. Pass on to those around you what God has given to you. Let's pray.